All right, I believe I'm recording. My name is John Pierce. I'm submitting this video for typing. Okay, and I have these questions over here. What is your average day or week like? Well, I'm sure right now during the quarantine you're getting a lot of weird answers for this. Um, so, right now I work every other week. 1 week we're on, 1 week we're off, and that way we're limiting the number of people present at the office by half. It's in order to reduce the risk of transmission, and also if one team gets it, the other team can continue working while the first team is in quarantine. So that's what we're doing currently. I wake up somewhere between 6:30 and 7. My alarm goes off at 6:30 and I snooze it a couple of times. I go to work. It's normally a 30-minute drive. Right now it's about 15 because there's not anybody on the road, which is nice. I don't really care for driving a whole lot. At work, what I do is I'm an information security engineer, so I have several different things I do. There's 10 areas in information security, and since I'm the only person there in charge of security, I'm in charge of 8. We do have somebody who's in charge of the auditing portion, which I have extensive experience in, but am happy not to do because it's a lot of detail work. And although I have gotten good at detail work, it did not come naturally. It took years of making mistakes over and over and over again to get there. And even now, I'm not great at it. I have friends in the profession who are much better at it. Simply because I'll just forget some detail somewhere. I'll go over it 6, 8 times. It doesn't matter. I just don't see it. And they will, which is good. So, and that's probably part of my ego. I like to, at work, give as close to perfection as I can and go above and beyond what you're expecting. So like one of my previous jobs, my boss really appreciated that I would have the answer before the question was asked. I have to do reports. That's just part of security, incident reports, whatever. But you also have to do, requests for new systems or changes to the systems or changes in policy. All of these things require writing essentially what is a technical report. And there were several times that job, because of the situation, I was able to really see what's coming next, which is one of the things I'm good at. And I was proactive about it, so I'd have the report already ready. And my boss, Matt, would come to me and he'd be like, "Hey, John, what do you think about this?" I was like, "Well, I actually wrote something about that 2 weeks ago." And he'd just be like, "You what?" "I already wrote something. I'll send it to you in a couple minutes." And I'd just shoot it to him in an email, and he'd be like, he was astounded. He's like, "I don't know how you do this." And I'm like, "I'm really good at seeing what's coming next." And to describe how that works, it's like I've spent the last 20 years studying people because everything else in the world makes sense, right? You see a car engine, you know how the pistons work, how the camshaft works, all of that stuff. That's anything mechanical, you know how it works. Anything chemical, you know how that works. You know how, the excess neutrons as they're coming off a nuclear reaction causes other atoms to become unstable, break apart, and shoot off more neutrons, and you get this sort of chain reaction. Everything else in this world is predictable. You know exactly the rate at which uranium is going to decay. People are not predictable by nature. I say that, but I think I've gotten much, much better at it. But early on, without a lot of information, they are not predictable. And so I studied that. So first I started studying it from the point of view of what are people thinking, right? And what are people thinking only gets you maybe 10% of the way there, I would say, because people don't spend a lot of time thinking in general. That's my honest opinion. As I used to say that they were dumb because they spent so little time thinking, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that there's a whole lot of programs that are written biological imperatives that we have. We have and other programs written by just experience, like your parents, how they treated you, how they treated others. That's going to set a pattern of behavior that you expect. So you have these patterns. Let's call them patterns, programs, and paradigms. So we have some alliteration there. So yeah, I like it. I like being coherent, and anytime I'm coherent and succinct, I'm super happy. So you have these things, and so like the thinking only gets you a very small piece of it. So I started studying what people how feelings work in people, because I thought, well, okay, that's going to be the other half, and it isn't the other half. It's probably another 10%. It really has more to do with paradigms, I found, than anything. So if you have a paradigm that people are inherently evil, then you'll behave a certain way in this world. You're not going to be very forgiving, and you're not going to go out of your way to be nice to people. It's not coming back, right? Whereas if you take the same sort of paradigm and you flip it and say, okay, people are inherently good, then you're going to be very forgiving. You're going to take advantage of a lot, and you're going to be open to people all the time, and that's where nuance comes in, because it doesn't seem like anything. So you guys talk about these coins. To me, these coins are not coins; they're sliders, and people are one way or another. So a double observer versus a double decider. There are people who are very, very double observer, like, and they're so caught up in either themselves or everybody else that their life goes to pot because of it. And then there's people who aren't quite as far out there, right? I'm not saying there's a lot of people in the middle, because I don't think that's the case. I think it's an inverse parabola. But I do think that it is a slider, and there's scales to this, and there's scales to everything. And so whether or not people are inherently good or evil, my answer to that is they're both. And we have the potential for both. And you really have to understand that. Otherwise, you end up with Nazism or communism. Both of them are from a misunderstanding of people's inherent nature. I got way off track. So I do stuff at work, and a lot of it involves being able to see patterns in data. So like I'll have a million row spreadsheet of quote unquote suspicious activity at our firewall. Most of that is noise. Most of that is coming from the same IP addresses that I recognize. So I know what the standard is. What you're looking for is the outliers, the weird stuff. Well, okay, what is this? Okay, it was a one-off that happened once and it moved on. That was probably somebody out there actively scanning the internet trying to find a weak spot in somebody's network. They found our network and then moved on. So you're looking for that sort of stuff, and you're assessing what's probably on the other side of that. So it's it's based on experience, but it's also based on your ability to see. And I think that's probably why I seem so weird to people, because I have this sort of ability to see what's on the other side of things, what's coming and stuff like that. But I also tie it to reality. So you can't have an idea that has no place in reality, or it doesn't seem to have a use to me. So in the end, it's got to make sense at the first. So the idea has to make sense mathematically, because everything comes down to math, basically. So it has to make sense mathematically. And then once you have this idea that makes sense mathematically, then you can go out and you can test it in the real world and see if it actually works. And if it doesn't work, you have to discard it. And that's sort of how I am with my paradigms, constantly having to rethink things because of some piece of information that comes along. Like a recent annoyance of mine was book club. So we had this book club, and I've been going, and for 4 months we had picked books. We, quote unquote, one person picks the book, everybody else has to read it, and they have been some pretty bad books. My wife picked a good book, of course, because she has taste. Some of the other books were not as good. So, but I muddled through them, because a long time ago I decided that there's this underlying principle that no matter where somebody is, there's something you can learn from them, even if it's just as a bad example. So I read these books. Get to the time where it's time for me to choose my book. Now, I bring in two ideas for books, and the reason why is I view my taste in reading to be quite a bit different than everybody else's, and so I didn't want to bring in something that nobody was going to read. So I gave them a choice of older book that's considered a classic. It's the book that the Blade Runner movie was based off of, and it's called "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep." One of our rules is you can't have read the book, so I thought this would be a great book because it kind of goes along with the movie, but it really doesn't, and I thought that would be very interesting discussion area to talk about. Well, it's like the movie here, but it's not like the movie there. Which did you like better, the movie rendition of the world or the book's rendition of the world? So I thought that would be a good choice. And the other book was a book by a female author who, it's a fantasy novel about this heroine who saves the day or whatever. You know, the typical fantasy, right? Well, they chose the fantasy book because they were like, oh, it'll be like Game of Thrones. It was like Game of Thrones. The main character gets raped right off the bat. So they didn't read the book. Nobody read the book except for Linda and I. And as it turns out, the story turns around. And anyway, so, but because they never made it past that, and they never made it past the titles. Everybody had a title in this book, and they were based on the Arabic titles. And I think that was a bit of an issue, too. They didn't read the book. It's kind of frustrating to me, because I'm like, it's one of book club. And that's when Linda was like, book club isn't about books. It's not about reading. It's about people pretending to read, talking about a book, and hanging out with their friends. And I don't like pretend. I don't like projecting something that I'm not. Don't get me wrong, I do it. If you invite me to a party or something like that, I have to get into a certain mode, and that mode is I don't think it's a healthy mode. And last couple of weeks, I've been thinking a lot about that. Because for the first time ever, I recorded it. It was one of the videos I was going to submit, and after going back and watching it, I'm like, I don't believe that. I'm literally watching myself say things I don't believe because I think it's popular, I guess you could say, or I think the people in the room are going to like it, and it's going to make them happy, and so it doesn't matter that it's not true. To me, it feels like that when I get into that mode, I throw away who I am in order to fit in, and I don't like that at all. But it is something I'm going to have to work on. I think that the way I'm going to have to do that is find a way to go into that mode in a happy way, because most of the time when I go into it, I'm going into it angry. I'm angry because I'm having to go to a party, or I guess angry is probably not the right word. I'm not good with feeling words. But anyway, I'm going into it with a negative attitude, and I'm getting out negative results, I guess you could say. So if I had an area to work on, I think that's it. And I've read books on how to win friends and influence people. I've read a lot of these books along those lines on how to have better social skills, and I don't think it's. I think it programmed part of me, I guess you could say, or I wrote programs based on it, and I think they're running correctly, but they're running with a false premise, which the false premise is that you can be dishonest with people and it'll turn out okay. I don't think that's true at all. But it seems like that's what I do, and that to me is very frustrating. Most of my anxiety and frustrations come back around to my behaviors or my place. Like a couple of years ago, right before Christmas, I lost my job because Oklahoma State Legislature decided to cut funding to mental health, which is the area I was working in as a developer. I was writing software to bill for medical billing. So I was doing that, and then because that's the three areas I work in, by the way: auditing, information security, and development. So I kind of moved back and forth between the three because I don't know. I guess I'm a bit like a cat and I can't stay focused. But anyway, so I got called. My boss called me up, and he happened to be my best friend prior. Not so much anymore. And he told me I was let go because of this or whatever. And then at the end of the call, he was like, "How do you think I feel after you go? I have to fire myself too." And I was like, "Oh man, I'm sorry about that," because they had just moved and bought a new house, and I knew that was going to be a financial burden on him. As it turns out, he was lying to me. That's why we're not friends anymore. I don't. You can lie to me about stuff you're embarrassed about, like, whatever. I don't care. You did pot when you were a kid, and you lie to me and tell me you never did pot. I don't care. What? It's your thing. If it makes you feel more comfortable to tell me you never did it, I'm fine with that. It doesn't bother me. But don't manipulate me with lies. That's where I draw the line. That's unacceptable. And that's what he was doing. He was trying to get my emotional response to be, instead of worried about my own situation, he knew I would immediately flip into being concerned about him. So, which is what I do. That's what I do whenever I hear somebody's in pain. Is I want to reach out to them. I'm not good at it. I'm not the person you want reaching out to you, but it is my instinct to do it. And I've always felt like that was, I don't know. It's just what we're here for. So we're here to. That's one of my underlying, I guess, principles is that we're here in service to each other. And I'm not. It's a good principle for me because it's not something I'm good at, or it's not something that's not my default. My default is to point out how stupid you are, how you brought this world yourself. That's my go-to, and I've worked very hard to get to a position where I'm like, oh man, I'm sorry. I think somebody probably pointed out how stupid I was and how I caused my situation, and then after that, I'm like, oh, okay, now I can see the other side of me. Seeing yourself in a mirror, you don't see yourself because it's inverted, right? But when you see yourself in live action, like somebody else is you, and you watch them do you, and up close and personal, it's interesting. Oh, this video you guys have of what is his name? Anyway, this actor, and he's in this movie, and the guy who's interviewing him goes, "Yeah, that character was creepy," and the guy latches onto it and won't let it go, and is constantly bringing up how I'm creepy. I mean, you just said I'm creepy. We're here in this creepy dungeon of yours, but I'm creepy, and he can't let it go. And that's one of those things that may not have anything to do with personality type, but it's something that I do too. Like if I feel I've been insulted, sometimes I will latch onto it, and I cannot let it go, and I have to badger you with it until I feel better. Is really what's happening. Anyway, I thought that was one of those videos where you're like, oh, you're seeing your own behavior, and somebody else is doing it. It's like, oh yeah, I've done that a lot, and I need to stop. It's just as, because on the inside of that, just to give you some inside baseball, on the inside of that, you're looking at it and you're going, oh, this is uncomfortable. He called me a creep. I'm so uncomfortable. You're so focused on what you're feeling that you're not realizing you're making everybody else around you feel the same way. And that's what that is. So that's my work. Drive home from work, eat. Oftentimes I'll play video games on my laptop or whatever. Linda works nights, so oftentimes I get home from work, get to see her for just a bit, and then she's gone. And on those nights I don't talk to anybody, not even my kids. I just hide. And I really think that if she wasn't in my life, I probably, and I didn't have kids, I wouldn't interact with anybody. I would be a hermit. Who goes to work, works hard, comes back to my room, and that's it. Maybe talks to people online because that for some reason feels different. I already talked about the stressful time, oddly, and let's see. Some problems I see with the world, like right now, it's discipline. In the end, it's discipline. And that takes various forms, but right now people aren't very disciplined with this epidemic, and they're going out and just doing whatever they want to do. What is it? And it's not just the people; it's the government's involved in it too. The governor of Florida reopening beaches. You're like, really? And if you look at their curves, and you can look at these data curves and see. So like now, Oklahoma's at a point where we're actually getting less new cases a day, every day, and we're on the downside of a curve. And after about 2 weeks, we're going to be so few new cases a day that we can reopen for a while, and then it'll spike back up, and we'll probably have to shut stuff down or dial it back. But you can actually mathematically see this stuff, and so these government officials have access to it, and then they're choosing to make decisions otherwise. And I think part of that is they have information we aren't privy to, which is fair. I say it was like back when Obama first got elected. One of my friends was like, and now he's going to shut down Guantanamo Bay, and I was like, no, he's not. He's like, what? I was like, I know he ran on that, and he honestly wants to shut it down, but he's going to sit down at a desk, and somebody's going to sit across from him who's been in government for a very long time and slide a folder across the table to him. And Obama's going to open up that folder and go, oh. And then he's going to slide it back, and Guantanamo is never going to get closed. And that's essentially what happened. I don't worry about missing information because I see missing information. Does that make sense? So like I see, oh, okay. Yeah. There's a reason we have that place open, and it's not to interrogate prisoners offshore or whatever reason you're being told. It's something else, and it's probably a good reason, and that's that. But yeah, I see the missing information there. I don't know what it is, but I don't know. Well, Neil deGrasse Tyson was talking about this with white holes. Like mathematically, we can predict that they exist. We've never seen any evidence of one. Whereas black holes, we can't really see that they exist, but mathematically they do. But then we can see the effects they have. Like we saw, this is a new one. Recently we saw an orbit of a star around a black hole, and that orbit looks like I don't know if you remember the spirographs, where you would make sort of a flower-like shape out of it. Well, that's what the star's orbit looks like. It's not a regular orbit by any means. It's a bunch of ellipses offset. And what that did was that put a final nail in the coffin of Newtonian physics with regards to astrophysics. And because at that point, the only way that happens is if you have some special relativity happening. Because as the star approaches the black hole, it starts approaching the speed of light. And then at that point, its mass increases. And so does its inertia, which is interesting. And then once it starts moving away from the black hole starts slowing it down. Special relativity kicks in, and its mass starts dropping, and so does its inertia. It's super fascinating stuff. But anyway, sorry, I get excited about science, math. Where was I? Oh, yeah, that's one of the problems I see with the world is in general that we aren't very disciplined. We can't listen, and in terms of survival, there's very few events that come around that are survival events. A pandemic is one of them. I think my video just stopped. I'm going to have to look to see if I got another video. But I'm going to go ahead and keep recording while I'm doing that. So I do think that is one of the problems, is that we have this sort of idea that, oh, the rules don't apply to me, I'll be okay, or whatever, and it's just not a very good method. It's not a good place to go. We're much better off just following our instructions. Huh. That's funny. As I move this around, it changes the brightness. I apologize about that. Okay. So next question is something about, tell me about one of the best times of my life. Best time of my life. So, I've had a lot of good times. I don't think in terms of good times and bad times a whole lot, but so I'm gonna say that one of the best times of my life was having my children, and I'm gonna group all that together because I think in terms of epics, right? Um, the chunks of time. So there's the chunk of time before I was adopted, which was very abusive physically and emotionally time period, and then the time period after I was adopted, which is a more healthy environment, but hmm, some issues there too. But I mean, come on, nobody's a perfect parent. And then you have a block of time after that where I went to college, met Linda, we got married, and struggled. Both of us working at Burger King in the beginning. It was a financial struggle, but we made it through it together. And then you have this time period where we have the kids. And the kids were interesting because like you have a kid and you're like, oh, and people are like, oh, you'll be attached to it immediately. Sometimes not. There are kids that I definitely immediately picked up and went, wow, this is my son. And then there are other kids that I picked up and I was like, this one's going to take a little bit of work. You cry a lot. So you have that. So you kind of learn that not everything is like people tell you. Old age is that way too. The older you get, the more you realize that old people have been not telling you things. And it's your duty and responsibility to not tell the next generation about what it's like getting old because I guess it's a cruel prank to let them be surprised. But anyway, I think that was probably the best time of my life because I was getting to do what I consider the most important thing we do on this planet, which is take care of children, raise the next generation. I think it's vital, and it's a very serious business, but at the same time, it's fun, right? You get to play with kids. I do enjoy children, and kids like me too because I treat them like little adults because that's what they are. So I like talking to them. Well, what'd you do today? Just like you would any friend or anything. That's how I talk to kids. And they tell me what they did today, and I'm interested in it, and I ask them questions about it. This is a part of the whole how to win friends and influence people is be genuinely interested in them. And it works probably better on children than it does adults. But yeah, I like talking to kids, and I really enjoyed that time period because they just have a different way of seeing the world. And now my kids are 19, 18, and 16. We're in between birthdays. By the end of June, it will be 20, 18, and 16. They're all 2 years apart. But they've turned out to be really fantastic people as adults, and I still enjoy sitting down and talking to them. And I like this too. I don't know. This is the problem. I've had too many good times to pick one as far as the best times of my life. I guess the other day somebody described me online as on Facebook as having a sunny disposition, and I was like, what? Because nobody has ever said that to me. I'm kind of a grumpy person. And I was talking to Linda about it, and she goes, well, that's why I like you. You have a sunny disposition. No matter what, we're going to overcome it, and we're going to do it together, and you're just, okay, let's do it. And I didn't think about it that way, but that does seem a little sunny. I have a friend, he's an EJ, and he has that sunny disposition that, no matter what, he's unflappable. I've never really seen him. I've seen him upset a couple of times, but not very often. But mostly whenever women, relationships, that'll take your sunny disposition and throw it out the window real quick. Which is why I'm real happy that I have Linda. We've been married for 25 years, December 17th last year. So 26 years this year, at the end of this year. So, when we first were getting together, people were like, you guys aren't a good match. And so this whole Myers-Briggs thing, we got into it because they were telling us, you're not a good match. Here, take this test. And she took it, and she came up as an ISTJ, which you guys have typed her as an ISFJ, SITI. And I came up as which is very close to, I guess, the ISTJ that she came up as. And I always come up as an INTP. I keep trying to be something else, but it's not that I don't. It's not that I don't think that the INTP fits me. The negatives do. It's the positives that I'm like, I don't know about that. But the negative connotations of it definitely do. If you see a meme about INTPs, it's probably describing me at some point in my life. And I've worked on the FE bottom or whatever, so they don't bother me as much. And of course, I've worked on SI a lot because of my job. So now I only get burned with that very, very rarely. Mostly I'll just forget to pay a bill. I've got some new software, though, that has nice little reminders. So this is what I do. Whatever it is that's causing me pain, I'll set up systems just to thwart the negative repercussions. So, like, I have this bad habit of showing up to work without my badge or whatever. When I worked at AOL back in the day, you had to have your badge to get in. And there were so many times and this is bad, I'd ride my bike all the way to work, get there, and not have my badge. That's a bike ride home and a bike ride back. You'd think that would be enough pain to wake up, but it wasn't. So I developed a system which is I leave my badge in my pocket until the next day when I get dressed, and then it immediately goes on, and it stays on all day until I go to bed. And you just constantly have it with you. And if you constantly have it with you, then you don't ever forget it. So something like that. So that's what I do. I create tiny little systems that annoy the people around me, but I do them because otherwise I won't remember. I won't remember the small details. I'll get distracted by whatever's in my head, solving problems, creating, being creative, whatever. There's a whole lot. I spend more time in my head than anywhere else. Just imagination or solving things. Like Linda will ask me to do something else or start processing it and be like, okay, what do I want it to look like? What are some of the negative things that can happen? How do you offset? How do you prevent that? What are some things you can do to ensure you get a better result? These sorts of things. I just kind of roll around in my head until it reaches a boiling point, and then it's like, okay, now I'm ready to do the task because I've had the time. The biggest challenge in my life right now, gee, get me talking about what I really care about. I have very little in the way of challenges right now because I finally have gotten to a point in my career where I'm happy doing work that I love, and I'm doing well. So, works, put that aside. I've got some kids that are graduating and going off to college. That's some issues as far as making sure they get everything done because they're not motivating teenagers is challenging. I'd say my biggest challenge in life right now is finding the next thing, the next goal. Like, I like to have a 5-year or 10-year goal, something out there dangling to go, okay, this is where I want to be. And for the longest time, that goal is where I'm at right now. So I'm here, right? And I'm enjoying it, and I've been here for about 2 years after I got laid off 2 years ago before Christmas. So I'm here now. I need to decide where I want to be in 10 years, and I'll be considerably older. So that's the thing. I've got to decide what's next because you've got empty nest coming because my kids are of the age where in the next 10 years they're all going to be moved out. That's a significant source of chaos. And then you have the job. Like, I don't see any reason to change jobs at this point. I'm in a stable place. It's virtually recession proof. It's not government work, but we work with the government. So I can stay here for the next 2 decades. And it's going to be that kind of stable, and it's work that I love, and I really enjoy the people. So don't see any reason to change anything like that. So I've got to find some other avenue of change. Now, I am painting again. I like to paint landscape paintings, and so maybe do something on those lines. I don't know. Um, hmm. Linda has been asking me the last couple of weeks if I'm depressed, and I'm like, no, I don't have touch. I don't have any contact with my feelings. Just so you know, I had a electrical accident and was doing something stupid and fried my brain and lost complete total touch with my emotions. It also muted them a bit, which Linda's very happy about. So when I get mad, I'm not as mad. So I'll still have the emotions. I just won't. I'm not experiencing them. As far as I'm concerned, I'm being Data on Starship Enterprise. You know, I'm not emotional as far as I'm concerned, but I am. It's running in the background and it's affecting me, but I don't see it. And so, like, one of the ways I know I'm feeling sad is I'll start to feel really tight in my throat, and I'll be like, yeah, I think I'm coming down with something like strep throat. No, dude, you're just sad. You need to go and listen to some sad music, and then you'll feel better. And I go and listen to some sad music, and what do you know? Oh, well, I feel better. So Linda's been asking me if I'm depressed lately. So back to what I was talking about without my little side diversion. So she was asking me if I'm depressed, and I was like, no, I don't think so. I think it might be because I don't have a goal right now. So depressed wouldn't be the right word. Aimless, maybe. So that sounds like the biggest challenge in my life right now is picking my next challenge. Oh, that's a good way of putting it. Picking my next challenge. And then that's the next question. What would you like your life to look like 10 years from now? No idea. I want my kids to come to visit me on a regular basis. So, like Linda's parents, we go visit them a lot. We haven't seen them since February because of COVID. And they're in their 70s. Both of them are on chemotherapy for their rheumatoid arthritis. So they've suppressed immune systems. There's no way in the world I'm going over there. So we haven't really seen them in a while, but we hang out with them all the time. We go eat and talk, and they've become really good friends, really deep friends. Like, I can talk to them about anything except for Linda. Obviously, you don't talk to your in-laws about problems with their daughter. My parents, on the other hand, we don't talk to at all. And this is my adoptive parents. I recently reconnected with my birth family, and my birth mom's still alive, but I have no desire to talk to her. She was the source of the aforementioned abuse. So, no. So I would like to have that Linda's parents kind of relationship with my children instead of my parents' relationship with my children. And so, to me, parenting is like, you've got these. So I call them transitions. Okay. So early on, when your kid's in elementary school, let's say, parenting takes a very distinct form. It's like there has to be consequences and punishments for behaviors so that they can understand which behaviors are acceptable and which ones aren't, right? And largely that tracks back to how are you treating people, right? Because if we're just talking about a behavior like picking their nose, I mean, that's going to go away on its own. So, okay, I'm getting into my whole parenting theory. But anyway, so you have these transitions. So when you're parenting an elementary child like that, then you have that piece of it. And the next stage, junior high, it's a different parenting style, right? Because they don't need reinforcement on right and wrong. And honestly, by the time they're in junior high, if they haven't figured that out, you've messed up. And it's a problem, and it's bad. So junior high, your parenting takes a different turn. And now it's teaching them how to cope with emotions, which is fantastic. They don't have all these wild mood swings until puberty, right? Which is great, because by the time they hit puberty, you're like, okay, I've taught you this. Now I can shift over and teach you how to handle emotional swings, how to handle the popularity contest that is life, how to handle, your identity. So you kind of move into that. And then by the time they get to the high school, you're like, okay, I'm done teaching you, really. Now we're polishing, okay? And it's too late to teach them anything new because they're going to have to learn it the hard way now, which is fine. You can't teach them everything as a parent, and you wouldn't want to. To be honest, it would make them weak. They need to learn some things on their own in order to develop character and strength. But anyway, that's a side point. So by the time they get to high school, you've moved into coaching mode. And coaching mode is, okay, good job, good job. Here's how you could have done a little bit better. But otherwise, good job. And it's just little tweaks here and there, and it feels like coaching, right? And then after that, after that is the transition from coaching to an adult relationship with a person. You're always their parent, but at that point, you're peers. You're both adults. So unless they're asking for advice, you don't give unsolicited advice. So now you're moving into a different area of parenting, which is the final phase where you've completely let go, right? So that's what we're heading towards next, and that's a big challenge. But my parents didn't make that transition very well, but his parents did. So I just would prefer to err on the side of her parents than mine, and so that you get a better result in the future. So yeah, okay. Well,